Good morning, family, on this Monday morning, and welcome to God's Living Word. Today I want to talk from the subject, Simply Complicated, and talk about the simple things that we oftentimes make complicated. From conversations that could be simple to assignments, whether they're at work or a part of our honey-do list, to the simple principles of God that religion seems to complicate. And I want to talk about simplifying things we make complicated to help us see that simple is always better. In fact, it's the simple things that God looks at when deciding whether to favor, forgive, or save us. And I'm not going to go into great detail regarding our keen ability to make simple conversations complicated, because that would require an exhaustive look into the different sexes to reveal our different methods of communicating, our different triggers, and our different methods of responding to certain stimulus. But I'm sure that if you've been married or in a committed relationship, that you've undoubtedly had days when you've thought and have communicated to your mate, just, honey, please, just make it simple. I'm guessing that we can all agree that simple is always better in getting to the point of any discussion and ensuring that all the parties understand the issues that are being discussed. Doesn't mean that all parties will come to an agreement on an issue, but it does mean that simple is always better. But this morning, in dealing with simply complicated, and how we make things that are meant to be simple complicated, I really want to address for a minute how we allow religion to complicate it, what is really meant to be simple regarding God and His expectations of us. I want you to see how complicated and confusing theology, doctrine, customs, and traditions oftentimes cause us to miss and overlook the simple. I want to help get us back to understanding the simple, that we stop making what is meant to be simple complicated. I want to help us see that religion doesn't define characteristics like love, but just the opposite, and help us to see that love really defines religion, and to help us see that it's better for us and all people that we interact with to be loving than to be religious. I say this because I can imagine that we would all rather have a neighbor, a mate, or an associate that was defined by being loving than being defined by his or her religion, when in actuality he or her was mean as a snake. I would imagine that we would rather interact with people that were defined as loving than to be defined by the labels of Christian, Muslim, or Jew, who in fact were mean as a snake. In fact, when we watch the news and witness all the atrocities committed on a daily basis, I ask you, how many of those stories that we watch and think immediately, I bet the perpetrator was a Muslim or a Christian? I think that many of us, if you're like me, witness these atrocities on a daily basis and think not from their religious perspective or our religious perspective, but think in terms of whether the action itself was good and evil. Now, I think this is the norm, unless the story that we're witnessing is about a mass killing or something that is going on in the Middle East. And then we only look to religion in those instances because we've been taught and conditioned to do that in such events, by events like 9/11 or the mass suicide killings that we witness on news shows that happen in the Middle East. But again, we only revert back to thinking about a person's religion because we've been taught and we've been conditioned to see those things through the eyes of our religion. But how many of you call murder evil because the perpetrator is Muslim, but see that same act committed by a Christian and not call it evil? Does evil somehow become different based upon a person's religion or ethnicity or nationality? I imagine that if you're like me, and maybe you're not, but I imagine that murder and mayhem is evil just because the simple fact that murder is evil. Well, it's the same thing when we witness racial bigotry and the mistreatment of the less fortunate. I ask you, is discrimination any different if the perpetrator belongs to a particular or a specific religion? I mean, how many of you that have been the victim of racial discrimination have thought that your perpetrator's religion was more important than his prejudice against you? The fact of the matter is that we concentrate on people's words and actions first, and then maybe, if it's brought up as an issue, consider the role of religion. How many of you, when someone has violated you and have broken into your home and have stolen your valuables, think about what you believe to have been the thief's religion? And does it make a difference to you if he or she was Christian instead of Muslim when looking at the fact that they've broken into your house and victimized you by stealing your peace and stealing your valuables, whether they were Christian or Muslim? Does that make a difference? When a rapist victimizes a woman and brutally assaults her, are you concerned then with the person's religious views? Or do you see that person and see his or her actions based upon the action itself without the aid of religion? You see, again, I don't know about you, but for me, evil is evil. For me, murder is murder, whether the perpetrator is Christian, whether the perpetrator is Muslim, whether the perpetrator is American, or whether the perpetrator is of Middle Eastern descent. And it's in seeing the simple and in understanding that this is how God sees us that serves to help us move back to not complicating things that were meant to be simple. I mean, you can just look at yourself and see how you look past a person's religion when you're looking at his words and actions, and apply that to God and understanding that he sees past our religions in the same way that we see past a murderer's religion, to see our thoughts, our words, and our actions, and base how he responds to us based upon the simplicity of our thoughts, our words, and our actions. And I want you to know this because it's important that we gain a better understanding of the simple truths about God and about his expectations. We use complicated religious phrases like the spiritual children of God based upon our religious beliefs, and then we attempt to, almost disregard the fact that we're all children of God, not based upon our religious beliefs, but based upon the simple truth that there's only one God that created all of us, irrespective of our beliefs, irrespective of our actions, irrespective of our nationality or gender. And just as we look past our children's gender or religious beliefs when we're looking at those and their actions, then we must also understand that God looks past our religion when looking at our thoughts, our words, and our actions. Again, I ask you, how many of you are more concerned about religion when your child does something at school or with friends that you knew he or she shouldn't have done? I believe, and maybe again I'm just talking about myself here, but I believe that our responses are more about our child or our children knowing better than what he or she has done, instead of being concerned about his or her religion. Again, we don't expect them not to do things that they do because of religion. We expect them not to do the things that are considered evil because we believe that they know better. Well, God says the same thing about us, and if we know better, we should do better, not because of our religion, but simply because we are created humans in His image and likeness, surrounded by people that have taught us better. And maybe you didn't get those teachings in your home, but I've got to believe that we've all had people say things to us that could have put us on the right track had we opened up our hearts and our ears to listen. So this morning I only ask that you would help me to make my dream in God's kingdom move closer to becoming a reality. And that's being that the masses begin to be more concerned with being referred to as, thought of as, talked about as being godly, good and honorable men and women, instead of only being identified as Christian, Muslim, or Jew. Because it's the simple things like love, honesty, peace, compassion, mercy, selflessness, forgiveness, respect, patience, humility, tolerance, fairness, loyalty, responsibility, and gratitude that makes for a better world and makes God proud of us. But it's the complicated things like religion that divides us into groups fighting each other for all the wrong reasons. Now, I don't know about you, but give me a person that's committed to the characteristics I've just listed, and I won't ever have to ask that person what his or her religious beliefs are, because I'll see them through their words and actions, and those words and actions are way more important to me than their religion. I mean, think about it and determine what's most important to you, and think about then what you believe to be most important to God. I will end by saying, as I always write in the messages that I have sent out to you all, that I love you. And I ask that you would help me to grow God's ministry in this earth. I ask that you would go to the Unity Movement's Facebook page and like the page. You know, if these words that I've shared with you have made a difference in your life, have inspired you in some way, and have helped you to see God in a clearer, more worldly view of Him, then like the page and share these messages on your Facebook page or via your email contacts. But if we are to grow God's kingdom, and again, His kingdom is about being on the side of good in the fight against evil, more so than it is being on the side of Christianity as opposed to Islam, fighting one another when the true enemy is evil all along. Even in the beginning of the Bible, or the beginnings of the teachings that we were taught about good and evil, it was never about good fighting good, but always about God being the epitome of good and Satan being the epitome of evil. It was always about good uniting with good that we destroy and defeat the enemy of evil. So again, if these messages have helped you in any way to better define the enemy, help you to better understand God, and to better help you see the simplicity of the things that we have made complicated, then I ask you to follow me as I lead the way back home to God, naked, without the aid of exterior labels, but realizing that God sees me by seeing my heart and my actions. Again, if you have any questions about God or about the Unity Movement, I ask that you would send an email to unitedforgood@yahoo.com. And as always, if it's God's will, I will meet you right back here tomorrow for another dose of God's living word. I thank you for tuning in. I wish you a wonderful remainder of your day. And, just as a reminder, give somebody a hug today. You just never know what people are going through. We all wear masks, and we don't necessarily wear our emotions on our sleeves. But somebody today, your hug might mean the world to them. Your words of encouragement might mean the world to them. Your smile may mean the difference in whether they give up on life or whether they take another step closer to God. But it's in stepping outside of ourselves and our own situations that allow us to do those things, to actually serve. And then if you really think about it, it's those things that really give us fulfillment anyway. It's knowing that we have, it's going home and being able to share that, babe. I said something and I saw a light come on in somebody else's eye. I saw somebody on the verge of giving up and throwing in the towel and committing suicide. A spark in their eyes. But that comes from getting out of ourselves and embodying the characteristics of good. Again, I will release information about the webinar in the next couple of days. And I invite you to participate in the webinars. The information isn't new information, but information that oftentimes get overlooked in our churches, in our synagogues, and in our mosques. But it's just to help us return to the simple things and to stop complicating the things that God always intended to be simple. So with that, I will say goodbye, or I will, if it's God's will, see you a little bit later. Have a wonderful day, and I love you. Goodbye.